I would like to first welcome everyone to the webinar about Gecko Spring 21 release. My name is Korana Leliak. I am Agilcon's Customer Success Manager, and today I will be your host. Presenters for today's webinar are Eva Krantz, Principal Solution Consultant for Gecko HRM, and Daniel Bogoev, Gecko Solution Architect. At the end of the webinar, we also meet Gregor Mesaric, Gecko Sales Consultant, who will be at your disposal in case you would need an offer for an upgrade. We are excited to share with you the most interesting updates for Gecko Spring 21 release. Our experts are going to present new features and innovations across the Gecko HRM application that will help you connect with your employees in new ways. We have spiced up today's presentation with an interesting demo, so stay tuned. I would like to invite you to use the Q&A section in your Zoom window for questions. We'll try to address your questions during or at the end of the webinar. Also, at the end of the webinar, we will ask you which highlight from today you found the most useful, and we would love to hear your opinion. Just a quick heads up, this webinar is being recorded. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Daniel. Daniel?
Thank you, Korana. So let's go over the agenda of what we will do today. As in step one, as you can see, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone, not for joining us today as much as our release, our features are actually a direct contribution from the ideas we got from our clients. So please keep them coming. We evaluate every single idea that you bring to us. And don't get discouraged if not all ideas make it into the product. We do evaluate based on how many we have received, what will go into the product now and maybe in the future. Today's agenda continuing. First, we are going to take a look at what has the Spring 21 release brought to us, to our clients. What are these new features? Then we're actually going to go into the demo. We will take a quick slide to introduce to you what we'll be showing you before we go into the demo and actually show you live. After the demo, as Summer 21 release is around the corner, we will discuss some of these cool features that are coming out in a few months. I will then hand it over to Gregor, who will explain the next steps if some of these features that you have seen are of interest to you and would add value to your current application. We will also leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So, what is in the Spring Release 21? Let's take a quick highlights. So the main features of our release are surveys. We've added surveys where we can collect feedback from employees. Currently, we have introduced this in the training administration. So after the employee completes a training, we can send them a survey to fill out and get valuable feedback on the trainings. We have a brand new module, assets, allowing you to have the complete asset inventory of your equipment, and most importantly, adding in to processes that make sense. So onboarding, offboarding, automatically bring in the assets that an employee should get, and ensuring that the assets, when an employee is leaving, are returned and everything is trackable. On the trainings part, we've added periodic trainings. So trainings that need to be done every year, every 2 years, reminders for them. We have training invitations where employees can confirm that they'll be attending, and of course, training requests. We have My Team. My Team is one of these modules that our clients requested it and brought a lot of great ideas, and we have built a My Team. So manager has a complete overview of their employees who are directly reporting to them or employees who are indirectly down the hierarchy. Finally, integrations. So any events, be it an applicant interview, an exit interview, anything related with dates and events can now go automatically into your Google or Outlook calendar. So that is the highlights. Now let's go into each individual module and see what has the Spring release brought to you. Well, we'll start with surveys. So the feature of surveys brings in the simple survey. So right now you can create surveys and add them to the training administration. As an admin, you can schedule surveys for training participants and of course, analyze results using the standard Gecko reporting. As an employee, when you complete a training, you will receive an email with a link to the questionnaire. You can complete the questionnaire. You can even do it on the mobile device. And of course, if you haven't completed it by a certain date, we will send out reminders that you need to complete those surveys. Each module that will be represented today, we are also going to show you what our feature enhancement is. So our future enhancement, what are the things that we are thinking about adding? So in this case, for surveys, our next step will be a survey composer. So an easy way for an HR administrator or a survey administrator to create the surveys. Different types of questions and answers. We would like to spice it up a little bit where you can maybe drag the answer on a graphical display. We are going to incorporate these surveys in all our other processes, such as offboarding, for example. Automatic generation of questions. So this could be something related to competencies where questions are then automatically generated on the survey. And conditional displays. So if you, for example, answer no to a specific questions, a second question might appear or a box where you enter some text inside. So these are what we are planning on as far as future enhancements. Assets. Assets is a brand new module we have added to Gecko. This is the complete management of your asset inventory, asset items, and the process of assigning assets to your employees. Every time an asset is assigned to an employee, there is a whole workflow process behind it where the employee also has to answer, has to acknowledge that they have received the asset. All assets, as everything in Gecko, all assets are now displayed on the employee profile. This is our central part for everything related to an employee. So of course the assets have been added there as well. Employees can also, as mentioned before, confirm, return assets as part of offboarding and onboarding. As managers, you can view the assets assigned to your team members. Future enhancements, we would like to add costs to the assets, as well as employee requesting, let's say their monitor breaks down, their PC breaks down, that they can request a new equipment. Trainings is something that is ongoing. I believe we have further enhancements coming up in the next releases. In this release, what we have added, as mentioned before, periodic trainings, which will remind you when the renewal date is coming up. So you can schedule those employees again for the renewal. We have added training costs. So per training session, so meaning employees, what the training will be cost, redistribute those costs per employee. As a manager, I think this is a feature I really like. You can now send invitations to managers, and the manager can decide which employees will be attending this training. And as an employee, if there's an external training, you can submit the request, which then can be scheduled as a training for the employee. Future enhancements are allowing to split costs. So if you have a group rate or a group price, you can then divide that by all the employees that have attended the training. As the next step from the manager registrations, we are also going to allow the administrator to indicate that the employee can register for training. So you will send out a training and the employee can then register for the training. And finally, have some interest where employee can indicate if they are interested in certain trainings. My team, I think this is my favorite feature of this release, is a manager view to access all the team members. This, as mentioned before, either direct reports or indirect reports. There is a bunch of features within the My Team dashboards, reports, list views, anything related to the managers' teams that will be displayed. And we'll definitely show you some of those things. An upcoming, all the upcoming events. So if you have an interview with an employee from the performance plan or an exit interview, all those events will be viewable, displayed to the manager to see when it's happening. And the future enhancement is what we would like to have is the managers or My Team requests have the ability to request an increase in salary, position change, department change, anything related to his employees and the manager requests. We didn't end it here. So those were the major changes as far as modules. We have added some other small goodies, which will definitely enhance Gecko. One is, as we mentioned before, is integrations. So any events, any date related events can now be synced to Google and Outlook Calendar. We have quick approvals on the homepage. So for assignments or for processes that it makes sense where they don't need to review it, they just need to approve, quickly approve, they can do it from the homepage now. These absence requests is one example of such assignments that can be quickly approved on the homepage. In the core HR, we have added civil status, so the tracking of civil status for employees. Tracking of external employees, something that we've gotten a lot of requests from our different clients. And we've added some new reports. So these are salary changes and family member age. So if you have some Christmas, Santa at the end of the year, you can, with a click, get the report of all those family members who are, let's say, under the age of 50. On the annual leave, as an addition to the annual leave, and I think it's a great new feature, is now after we calculate annual leave, we will also track any changes. So if an employee gets a new family member during the year, of course, they're entitled to an additional day of vacation. This will be automatically calculated. The administrators will be able to review it and then update the annual leave calculation, adding those days that the employee is entitled to. Also, as part of the annual leave, we are now have reminders to employees that when the end of the period, so end of June is coming up, they'll be notified if they still have vacation days available to them from the prior year that they need to use by the end of June. On the mobile function, the full employee profile is now visible. So with all the related lists, including new lists such as assets. Okay, now let's get into the demo. As mentioned before, we will first show you a slide. I will then talk about what we will show you, and then we will actually go into the demo because we assets. What I will be showing you with assets is, of course, the asset inventory. As mentioned, this is a brand new module where we can track the inventory, where we can assign individual assets to employees. We will take a look at the asset model, which enables you to create asset categories, add individual items, and then assign those to processes such as onboarding. Meaning when you create an onboarding plan, it will automatically grab the assets entitled to the employee and put them on the onboarding plan, where the equipment or the asset manager will be responsible for assigning those assets specifically to that employee. Also, we will take a look at the offboarding, where any outstanding assets assigned to the employee are available to them and need to be returned when the person's leaving. So the complete list is automatically generated in the offboarding process, indicating all the assets that the employee needs to return. So now let's get into the demo. Starting with assets. As mentioned, asset as a new module comes with a new application called assets, where we have a few tabs. We have the asset inventory, the model we mentioned, any drop-down values that will be used, and of course, any reports associated with assets and dashboards associated with assets as well. First step, of course, is to enter the asset inventory into the system. So in this example, I am talking about an iPhone. We enter the iPhone with certain details. So as if you're starting today, we indicate if it's active. This is as of today, the iPhone is available. We classify it, which classification model, which type of equipment it is, which category it is, and we also allow you a subcategory. On top, you will see if this asset is active, all the category and types, and I think the really valuable feature is that it indicates how many iPhones you have. So in this case, we have 10 iPhones, and how many are still available, 7. So meaning that 3 iPhones have already been assigned to the employees. For each asset inventory, we now have asset items. These are individual iPhones that have their own serial numbers, their own guarantee how long it is displayed here. The asset manager comes in, adds these assets. So by clicking new, they will add an asset where they say when it was purchased, how long the period is, the warranty period is. It will then also automatically calculate when it expires, if it's decommissioned. So once the asset is no longer available, you will also the date that it's going to be decommissioned. Clicking on the asset will bring you into the individual asset item where you record the serial number, the date it was purchased, as well as having the opportunity to assign this asset to an employee. So here we can see assets for iPhone, we can assign to an employee. What does this mean? It means that once you assign the assets to an employee and hand over the asset to the employee will receive in my assignments that an asset has been issued and that they need to acknowledge that this asset has been received by the employee. We then go into our standard workflow procedure. So where it says the admin checked out an asset, so the admin has given an asset to the employee and the employee acknowledges that this asset has been received. And of course, we have some standard information regarding this asset that the employee has received. As mentioned, all assets that are assigned to employee end up on the employee profile. The employee profile is the central part of all the information related to them, including assets. So in this case, we can see that Bill Adams here has quite a few, has an access card, a computer, a phone, a mouse, and can also see in what status that asset is in. So that is, in principle, adding assets, assigning assets to individual employee. Now we will take a look at the asset model, which allows you to, one, categorize each item, being, is this a computer monitor? Then we add all our asset items into the model. So meaning mouse, headset, and so forth. And then finally, we can say which model items or which assets need to be assigned to either an employee group, a department, or job position, or an individual employee. Once we assign these assets to this model item assignment, it will be, once you create the onboarding, automatically brought into the onboarding plan. So automatically, depending on the job position, department, or employee group, they will receive the list of assets that the employee needs to receive. On the onboarding plan, we have now added a new tab called Assets, which the asset administrator has access to. Here he receives the list of all the assets the employee is supposed to give, and of course assigns each individual asset to that employee. Once he assigns each individual tab to the employee, it once again, for each item that the employee receives, he needs to acknowledge that he has received this item. This allows you to track the complete process. So asset checkout from the asset administrator to receival of the asset. So we record when the employee has received it, when they have acknowledged they have received the asset. Finally, when the employee is leaving the company, part of the offboarding plan, besides the checklists that we had already before, we also added the asset handover in the tab handover, where all the assets that are still active, haven't been returned, are automatically brought into the offboarding plan for the administrator to check back in. So meaning that once the employee hands them over, the administrator comes in here and checks it, that it has been returned. Once the asset has been returned, it is then available to be reassigned to a different employee once again. So that is the overview of asset inventory. Now, if you go back to the next feature, my team, this is something, like I said, is one of the most interesting features of the Spring release, to me at least. We'll take a quick overview, what the manager sees. We will take a look at some of these dashboards available to the manager. So contract salary, for example, and absence dashboard. We will also take a look at some of the other features, such as reports that they can access directly, or lists such as offboarding plans, onboarding plans as well. Okay. Any manager, so Bill Adams in this case in our demo, has access to a new shortcut called My Team. My Team is only available for any manager, any employee who has direct or indirect reports. So only they will get the shortcut My Team. Once they click on My Team, they come to the My Team, let's say, dashboard or workspace, where, first of all, on the left side, they will see their direct reports. They will also receive filters on top where they can search by either department or employment type. This is for managers who may be responsible for more than one department, a bigger group. In this case, we see that Bill only has 3 direct reports. They can also set the filter to see direct or indirect reports, or at all. On the right side, we have features, dashboards, reports, list views, anything associated with the ability for the manager to see. We have categorized these components. So we have anything related to jobs, for example. So this could be a dashboard of contracts and salaries, anything related to offboarding, contracts that might be expiring to keep track. So this is a report. We have anything related to absences. We have a whole absence dashboard, which we'll take a look at. We have a report where they can click and see upcoming absences. We have everything related to performance. One is the performance dashboard. We'll take a look at that. We have anything related to onboarding, so any new hires the manager might have. Anything that reports upcoming PR meetings, goals, and performance dashboard. Then the final category is skills, where is anything related to trainings, what are upcoming trainings of their team, and any licenses, certificates that the manager's team might hold. And then the final section is My Team's events, where anything upcoming dates is displayed. So we can see the performance review with Alice Smith. We have an onboarding review meeting, and Alice Smith is also going on vacation, not anytime soon. So that is the starting page from where the manager can then get to the individual topics that he or she might be interested in. And let's take a look at some of these dashboards available to Bill as the manager. So my team's contracts and salaries, so general employee data. So we can see, for example, here we have employment types. We can see that all our permanent employees that Bill's team includes. We can take a look at salaries, for example. We can see that Aston Watts makes the most and Ann Jones the least. We can get an idea of the salaries ranges for the team. Any temporary contracts, as we saw above, we only have permanent employees, but any temporary contracts that might be expiring this month, next month would be displayed here, depending on the filter settings you set. This is interesting. We can see last salary changes. So all the salary changes that occurred for all the employees. You can see that Aston Watts got a salary increase of 325 euros per month. And we can also see, we can categorize them saying if it's above a certain amount, color them green. If it's within certain range below that amount, orange. And then if it's a small amount, red. Length of service, always interesting, is how long a person has been in company or how long a person has worked. This is also depending on the filters we set in the reports. And then another interesting is the average salary of your team. Like with any dashboard or what we've seen before, we can always take a look at what my direct reports are, or as a whole team, my direct and indirect reports. Okay, continuing with another dashboard, absences. On the left, we see how many days my team has still available. So this is something, if it's high, we might start asking them to start please planning for the year so we can distribute the vacations between the team members. We have the transition days. So these are how many days were carried over from last year and how many days from last year they still have available. Something that's actually coming up. Like I said, at the end of June, those days must be used up. So this is something that the manager can take a look at and start planning on notifying employees, making sure they either take these days off or they come to an agreement to maybe extend for another month or so. On the left, then we can go on. We have upcoming absences. These are any absences that an employee will be taking soon, how many working days and when those days are. Then we can have statistical reports to see what the breakdown is of annual leave compared to sick leave in this case. And we can also compare from prior year to this year how vacations are taken. So we can see that, for example, here we have 2020, September. Once those entries are in, we can compare when most of those vacations are taking part. Now, if we go back to my team dashboard, we can take a look at the PR dashboard that the manager has. You can see what status the PR is, so the performance plan is. Is it still being evaluated by the manager? Is it still in the first step where the employee has to evaluate? So he gets an overview of how the process is flowing of the performance plan. We can take a look at upcoming PR meetings. So within the performance plan, we can set dates of meetings between the employee and the manager and when those dates are coming up. By cycle, so we can see where we are standing at. So manager completes or has been already completed. And then we can, based on our values in the performance plans, give an average rating of the whole team, for example, and what the completion of the goals are, where the goals discrepancy is. So between what was evaluated between the employee and the manager, how big the discrepancy is. What is the average competency rating and what is the discrepancy between what the employee thinks and what the manager evaluates. And then we can see the individual competencies and how it is averaged out through the team. All these statistics are available for the manager to review, to see, and to make certain actions from it if he pleases to. So giving complete view, complete control to the manager here is what really is the key. So this is what we are. I can see that in the future enhancements, we'll be adding new features in here for the managers to see and do. So that is quickly my team. To continue, the final thing that I'll be presenting today before we get to the trainings is annual leave changes. I will do a quick overview of the annual changes, how it works for anybody who hasn't worked with it yet. And then we will focus specifically on what is new in this release. So this is managing changes, where the Gecko automatically notifies you if an employee is supposed to get an additional day. Annual leave starts with the cycle, so where we define the period for which we'll be calculating the annual leave for the employees. So of course, we have a start date of the first and the end date at the end of the year. In this case, these are the details that go in for the annual leave calculation. We then go to models. Models are rules that indicate how we will calculate the annual leave, what the basis is, what are these additional days the employee is allowed to receive, family members, years of service. The model is created based on the rules that you as a company have. The model gets then added in, and then when we calculate the annual leave for our employees, this is done in the Forms tab. We can en masse create annual leave for everybody in the company, where we then take in the model to calculate the rules. So we can see how many days they have. So we see here, everybody's been here a year. If they had started in the middle of the year, then it would calculate partially how many days they have. We have days transitions. This means how many days were brought over from last year. And then all the individual, how many days they still have available, how many days they have for the year, how many days they need to take by the end of the year. Once we create and calculate this and review it, the administrator can then publish with announcement. What does that mean? Once we are done with the calculation, so reviewing it, we can notify all employees who receive an email, and they receive in my assignments that the annual leave has been calculated, and they can review it. Once the employee clicks my assignments, reviews the calculation for the year, it will disappear from my assignments from the homepage. But of course, as in everything else, he can always enter it through my profile and get to the data that he needs. So the annual calculation will always be available to them. We also have some analytics. So this is for the administrator to see, for example, here, annual leave status, how many have been published, how many have already been read. So we can see that 3 of them have been viewed and 2 people haven't viewed it there. And another example of analytics is, of course, vacation usage. How many days have already been scheduled? How many days are still remaining? So we can see 19 days have been used. The whole company or the whole group still has 103 days to schedule or available. Now to our new tab, changes. This new feature is meant to make your life easier, basically. Based on the rules that we have, we know when a change can occur. So for example, if currently you have 1 family member and you got 1 day, but you have a newborn this year, you can then, when you add the new family member to the family members related list, the system will run and calculate. Actually, you're supposed to have 2, but you only have been given 1 day. You are supposed to get another day. The changes mask will display all these changes that have occurred. every day this will be updated, and it will recalculate, review all the employees to make sure there is no discrepancy between what they have right now and what they might be eligible today. In this case, we have Alice Smith, who has increased her service years, entered and is supposed to get another 2 days of vacation. We also have Ann Jones, who just gave birth and has another family member. And because of this new baby, she's supposed to get another day vacation. This is here for the HR administrator to review first. Once they review and they accept, they can click everybody, click update, and the annual leave for that employee will be automatically updated with those additional days that they're entitled to. So that kind of wraps up my part of it. I will now hand it over to Eva, who will discuss training administration and surveys. So Eva, please.
Yes,
take
thank
over.
you. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for handing over. Hope you can hear me well and see my screen. Daniel left me a nice part of enhancements to present. So I'll be talking about the training module, which I believe some of you are familiar about and are already using. And the survey module, which is a great addition to Gecko in this release. So in the upcoming minutes, I'll focus on these features that you see now on the screen. So I'll show you how, as a training administrator, you can manage periodic trainings, how Gecko helps you in and reminds you about when to schedule the training, who to invite, and so on. We'll talk about and we'll look at 2 new ways of inviting or registering employees to the training. So either by inviting managers to register employees or by allowing employees to submit a training request. In the end, we'll quickly look at how, as an administrator, you can enter and analyze training costs. So how much you spend for training this year, what are estimated costs, etc. And finally, the survey. So the trainings module is the first module where we activated the ability to schedule surveys. As you might know that, when you organize a training, an important step is also to follow up in the end and ask participants if they liked it or not. So now with training service, this would be possible to manage directly via Gecko. All right, so let's jump into Gecko. Hope you are familiar with this view. We have some people who are already using Gecko, some not. So I'll try to guide you through, so that will be interesting for both groups, for those who are already know how to use it and for those who are not familiar with it yet. So we're in the trainings module now, as you can see. So this is the place where the whole complete administration of training happens. And what we added now is just ability to manage periodic trainings, which is nothing different than how you manage trainings now. There's just, for example, in your training library now also the option to add recurring training. So this is a training which happens in a certain with a Slovenia by law. All office workers, as you know, need to complete health and safety and this kind of trainings every 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and so on. So this is an example of training we would look at also now. I've already, it's targeted at all office workers. They need to complete it every 3 years. As you can see, entering a recurring training is no different than entering any other training in Gecko. There are just a few additional details that you indicate on the record. For example, here we can see that it's a recurring training, and there is a new section here where you indicate what's the frequency. So this will be depending on training. But the rest, basically, it works as with any other training. Additional thing is that you, for example, in the related list of this training, also indicate who this training is targeted. For example, different companies have different trainings, periodic trainings. This example that I'm showing is targeted or meant for all office workers. It might be that the frequency of training is different for different groups. So in this case, you would have different trainings in your library with different groups indicated here. Why is this important? This is basically how Gecko knows who needs to go to this training and reminds you to invite them to this training, so you don't have to have all in your head. This is taken care by the system. So what you probably notice is, at least people who are already using training, what's new here, it's also this button that leads you to the report that basically shows you based on your target group who actually needs to go to this training. So let's have a look at it for this example. I have it already opened here. Just a classic Gecko report, but which shows me that for this training, I have actually two categories here. There are 5 people who need to go. There are some, these 2, that actually maybe have joined the company very recently, that they have to go to this training for the first time. Or there are some, these 3, for example, that have already been to this training, but as they need to go every 3 years, they need to renew it. So that's very handy. And as in this example, for example, for this training, I can see here on the list of training sessions that we repeated it already 2 times. And now, for example, I want to organize a new repetition for 2021. I've already put it in the system. And as I know that there will be 5 people that are on the list to go, let's now have a look at how Gecko further helps me to register those people. So if I open this training session, I hope you're familiar with this view as well. This is basically where I have all the details about my registrations and so on to this training session. So this is works completely the same as for any other training. The only difference is that when I click to this button to add people to the training, Gecko already helps me and shows me those 5 that need to go. So no more, no more Excel tables with who has been to the training, who has to go, when, etc. That's also all taken care by the system. So as I see those 5 people here, I can further filter to see those who needs to go for the first time or needs to review it. And further on, I can also see for those that need to renew it, when is the due date. For example, I see that Daniel and Jack have only due date in 2023. So because I'm organizing this training now in October this year, I'm not going to invite them. They can go next year and so on. So basically, this helps me also to pick only the right people who I need to invite. I just register those people to the training, and the story here continues as with other trainings. They, depending on the registration process, people need to confirm, etc. But it's no different than for the other trainings in the training module. As it goes for the recurrent trainings, if I go to the employee card of, as you know, on here, all information is stored that we know about Daniel, including his trainings. So with this recurring periodic trainings functionality, we also added a new section here next to the trainings that actually highlight only those periodic recurrent trainings, including this information if the person needs to go to renew it or for the first time and so on. So that's actually very nicely highlighted here to, you know, be this information to be handy for the employee or for anybody else, let's say manager or administrator who is looking at this profile. So these were the periodic trainings, a feature that I think will come handy to a lot of companies, at least based on the feedback that we are receiving from you. Now let's jump to the next feature. I mentioned that I'll show you basically 2 new ways of registering people to training. By now, as you know, Gecko supported registration flow where training administrator opened a new training session, and then on the registration step, just invited people to the training, whomever he deemed needs to go. But that it's not always the case, right? You don't always know who needs to go to the training. So what we've added now is the option of inviting people to the training. And in this case, inviting managers to register their employees. So let's look at this example. We have a training called Giving Feedback. A company organizes this session because, you know, we receive feedback that people are not as good as in giving feedback, but we don't know actually who we want to invite, which people would benefit from this training the most. So what we do as administrators, right, we could send out invitations to managers and ask them, dear managers, you know, just look in your teams, who do you think would benefit from this training? Just register them, and then we'll organize as many sessions as needed. So how do we do that? On this, there's a new tab on the training session called Invitations. If I decide to use this option, I just add people who do I want to send invitations to. I have here an option. I see all people who are managers, right? I want to send invitations to managers. I see all my managers. I see how many number of direct reports they have. In this case, they have very small teams. And I just select them and add, and then invite to register their team members. For the purpose of this demo, I've already invited some. So I've already invited 3 managers to provide this information. And let's have a look at how this looks for them. So when I invite them, they of course receive an email, they receive a task on their home screen in Gecko. And when they open this task, that's what they see. They see a form where they see which training session we are asking them to register people to. They see a deadline, so by when they have to decide and submit this suggestion. And they see at the bottom of the screen basically a place to add people by, you know, whomever they think that needs to go to this training. So as Aria, I have 5 team members. So I would just say, okay, look, those 3 from my team would actually benefit really, and I would like to send them to this training. Aria clicks register and submits this form. After that, the registration process follows as for any training session. So depending on the settings on the training session, this registration needs to be approved, confirmed, whatever it's set on the training session. And at the end, the registrations are finalized. So basically, this is just another way allowing the training administrator to choose what's the most appropriate for this training. How do I want to invite people register to this training? That's just another option to use. The next section I want to show you is another way of registering to the training. So we know that situations are very different. And for example, sometimes the initiative for going to the training doesn't come from the administrator, right? So it's not always that we organize a training and then register people too, but sometimes our employees are very eager to learn, and they give the initiative. So I want to go to that conference, I want to go to that event, I want to do that certificate. And this kind of requests or wishes have some budget considerations, so they need to be approved and so on. So why not manage that through Gecko? So as an employee, in the section on my home board where I submit all my requests for absence and so on, I have another section where I can submit a new training request. So I just click that, click here to open a new form. Enter the data, like what's the training date, when is it happening, for how many hours, where, and so on. I even choose a training type if it's an internal, external. Most of times I think it will be external, and so on. And I submit this request. This request, as I mentioned, usually needs to be approved, right? I cannot just go to the conference with that kind of budget. So when employee submits this request, it goes through this approval process. So this is the request. This is an example I prepared for this demo. So for example, a person, Tyrion, wants to go to the HR conference happening in September. He will be there for 2 days. This is the estimated cost, including the registration fee, transportation, and so on. So Tyrion submitted it, and it goes to manager for approval. Manager is notified. He has, of course, the option to approve, reject, or even say send it back to the employee saying, okay, what's this? Please enter more details, and so on. And after the manager approves, it goes to the training administrator just to register it in the system properly, ensuring that, for example, all the details that employee entered, like the training method, category, and so on, it's correct. Why it goes to the training administrator? Just because he has a look at it, approves it as well, and after that, this is basically considered as any training registration. So it's part of analytics, part of, if you are tracking training costs and so on, which we'll have a look at later. This request, it's also included, so it needs to be categorized properly. So that's another way of registering to the training, handy for some cases. We enable that as well in this release. Going on, training costs. So as you can see, we're adding a lot to the training module. This is because it's actually quite a complex thing. And there's so many things you have to think about when you're thinking about training. One is also how much will it cost? As we have all information about trainings in Gecko, why not also register the costs and manage the budget of trainings as well? So what we've added is, if we look at, for example, this training business communication course, we've added a couple of things. On the related list, where you actually enter all sorts of details about the training, you can also enter estimated costs. So this will then help you. For example, for this training, we already know that every time we'll do this training, it will cost us 2,000 euros just for the lecturer to come, because it's an external lecturer, and so on. So if you do that estimation for every course that you offer, it actually based very nicely by reporting this, gives you an indication of how much you will spend for trainings this year. But it doesn't end here. So that's just the estimated costs when we actually organize the training. So for example, for this example, we've already organized 2 repetitions. So one, well, they're still not happening, but one will be in June and one in August. And for each of those, we can also then enter the actual costs, right? So we estimated just the lecturer, but then if I look at one of these trainings, so the one in August, here on the related tab, we have the list of the actual costs which I entered. So for example, we had to book rooms that cost so much. We have to, you know, order some materials and so on. So administrator basically just enters these costs one by one by including cost type, quantity, unit, etc., and currency and so on, which basically then calculates. I can already see, for example, already on the first detail page, I already see the detailed costs. But then also on the training itself, we look at the training back where I have all the repetitions of this training. Here in the analytics, we've added also the chart where you can easily see how much you spend for all repetitions of this training on venue, on materials, lecturer, and so on. Yes, having this data in Gecko basically enables you to do all sorts of reports. As you know, the whole functionality of reporting in Gecko is very powerful. So just to show you 2 examples, for example, training costs per year, right? I can see for all my trainings how much I spent. Let's see, in 2021, it's been quite a expensive year when it comes to training, or even costs by category. As you know, we categorize trainings, right? So for all the trainings, we indicate in which category they belong, and we can then break down the cost numbers by this category. So for example, here I see that in this company, we spend most of money on improving soft skills of our employees. So these were the training costs. Again, another feature that you can just decide to use if that's important for you to have in the same system, where since you already have all your training data in Gecko already. The last feature that I'm going to show you is surveys, and I'm pretty excited about that because that's a completely new module in Gecko that we added based on your feedback. In this release, you will be able to schedule surveys for trainings, but in upcoming releases, we'll add that to also other processes, other occasions, so it will spread out around different features as well. But just to give you a quick overview of what it looks like. So surveys is a completely separate module. And where you can enter all sorts of surveys in different for different purposes. For example, when you enable this feature, it will already come in this case, in this spring release, with 2 surveys that we've already prepared for you. For example, a training effectiveness survey, a short version or a detailed version, but just have a look at one. So a survey is defined by all sorts of settings, the intro tags, the thank you tags. So all these very configurable, right? So you can set it up by yourself. It's defined by questions and so on, the rules for who needs to receive this survey and so on. And for each survey that you set up in the system, you can really nicely also see how it will look like. So you kind of see a nice preview that you can see before you send it out to people, how it actually looks like. But let's have a look at what it looks like in the training module. So I'm going to open up an example of training. We're looking at English for beginners. So this is a screen that you're all familiar with, but you probably noticed that we've added another tab here to basically manage surveys for this training. What you can see on this tab is, of course, the results. We'll look at that a little bit later, but here's also a section where you can schedule the survey. So we set up the survey before in the training model, in the surveys model module. So you do it that just once, but then for every training, you can then schedule out and schedule it and send it out for the participants. So I've already have an example here, but how would I do it? Is just add a new survey action, select a training, select a survey that I want to send out. All the data would be already pre-filled, and I would save it and activate it later. But I just want to show you that there are different rules for sending out the survey. For example, you can send it out immediately, meaning that as soon as I do this survey action, surveys would be sent out immediately, but I can do it a little bit in a more advanced way. For example, I can prepare it in advance and schedule it on a fixed date. I would just enter, okay, I want to send it on Sunday evening or on Tuesday, whatever seems the most reasonable. Or even more advanced, I can schedule based on the date field on the primary object. Primary object here is the training session because I'm sending it for training. So I can just say, send it out. Look at the session end date on the training session end date. Send it out one after the training ends, and keep this survey open for 5 days. So this kind of settings I do here. I can also, indicate here when I don't want to send reminders, when I don't want to send an email at the beginning of the survey, whether I want it to be enable option to answer survey anonymously, etc. So this is how do I do it. I activate it, and then basically based on the rules that I set, the surveys would fly out to our participants of the training. What would it look like for them? We've seen a short preview before on the survey itself, but they would actually receive an email. That's the settings I used. They would receive a task on home board, open it, and they would see something like this, depending on the intro text that I set. They would start the survey, answer the questions that are part of this survey, and submit. This was a short one, right? Usually we want it to be not too long, just long enough to receive the right information, but still short enough for people to be motivated to fill in. So as soon as people fill it out, I can already see the results. If I go back, for example, here, I see the results depending on the questions I have, but the questions, for example, with the default training survey are very, very similar. Like, how would you rate the training? Was the content structure clear, logical? Were the topics relevant? And here I would immediately see what were the average results for this training. I would also see the NPS score, so how many promoters, detractors, passives we've got, if that's a question that I would use in the training survey. If I really want to go in detail, I also see submitted surveys one by one. For example, if I open this one, I would just see, the answers that the person gave. Okay, this example was not filled yet, but for example, this one, I would just see the questions and what were the answers on this survey. The best part is, again, analytics. So having this data in the system, it allows us to look at this feedback from all different angles. And it's just one example that I want to show to you. For example, we send out a survey for English for Beginners course. We send it out for our culture course, and that these are the results. Important, of course, was to keep the set of questions the same throughout all the trainings, for example, so that we can easily compare it. And here we can easily see, question by question, which course was better than the other one, where do we need to improve, and so on. So it allows us comparison like this. There's plenty of reports that already come with the survey module and also a dashboard. I want to show you an example here where we looked at surveys in general. So that would be probably a dashboard that a survey administrator, a person in company who would be in charge of surveys, would look at frequently. Here we have just information about how many open surveys do we have, what's the completion, by, for example, by primary object, by department, by the survey, if we have multiple. We also see the NPS score per survey, per training. So from all different angles, we can look at this data. So that would be trainings and surveys. Just to recap, we looked at quite a few additions to the training module, from periodic trainings to new ways of registering people, to training costs, and finally to surveys, which will keep on expanding also in the future. So by that, I hope you got some ideas for how you want to improve or enhance Gecko also in your organization. But not to end here, I also like to present you what's coming up also in the future. So these are the features that Danny and I walked you through are already available. So we can already start the implementation process for you. But this is just to give you an idea of what else will be coming our way. Of course, I have to mention this forward-looking statement that whatever we talk about our plans, it's based on the current plans, but might change due to maybe your feedback or the situations that occur in the future. This is our roadmap for the release, for the next release. So today we're talking about spring release, but in a few months, summer will be here. So for those who are not going on holidays, we're organize a similar session and talk about the features that are coming in our summer release. Just to give you a heads up, we'll keep on extending the survey module, meaning that we'll enable this also in other processes, for example, offboarding, which is also maybe an HR moment to ask employees for feedback about our company, about why they left, and so on, and other processes as well. For example, you would be able to send survey multiple times per year just to track the climate in the company, the employee satisfaction, and so on. Trainings, the training module will also keep on extending. Here are a few things that are coming up. So as we've seen now, we can invite managers to register their employees to training, but we'll add a feature that you can invite employees directly. So that will come handy for trainings where you're not sure if people want to go or not. You just invite them and they can decide by themselves. We'll also add some features that will enable lecturer to go into Gecko and see the data and manage the data about their training session. For example, they will be able to just after the training session enter the training attendance directly into the system. Or for employees, what's coming up is that they will be able to not just register for the training, but also express interest in the training, meaning that they will just, whenever they want, they will look at our training catalog and say, okay, I'm interested in that training session, which will be a good indication for the administrator to organize a training if there are multiple people interested. Then we have a module of performance management. A nice feature that's coming up here is to request feedback on employees. That will become part of our performance review. So now only manager and employee are involved in our performance review process. But by adding a feedback feature, manager will be able to ask for feedback on employee from anybody in the company, meaning that they will be able to get more perspectives on employee, more input to use in the performance dialogue with the employee. More technical thing that I want to also mention is that we are enabled inline edit on performance review, meaning that will make it a little bit easier for employees to fill in the form to basically improve their user experience with adding and entering data into the form. The fourth big feature that's coming up, it's our employee personal data updates. What we want to achieve here is that there's lots of employee data that we keep in Gecko, and we want to give ownership of that data to employees. So for data that they know the best, they should be the ones entering in the system and ensuring that it's up to date. Just to give you one example, if, for example, I as an employee move house, so I change my address, by now probably I have to call HR or send them an email, please change my address in Gecko, and then administrator goes in and types it in. Just to improve this process, we'll enable employee to go directly into Gecko and enter their address directly in there. Of course, it will go through a check from administrator just to make sure that everything's all right. But then the data will be already in the system, approved, saved, and so on. So that will, give more self-service to the employees, and also at the same time ensure our data quality is even better. In this section, there will be also another feature coming for mass requesting employees to have their data. This will come handy to administrators, for example, where they will see that the data it's not up to date, and they will just request the employee to update it. Or, for example, if there's a moment in a year when they know that this data needs to be updated, for example, again in Slovenia we have a family member tax deduction that needs to be maintained on a yearly basis. So that will be a good feature for administrator, just to once per year at a good time send a request to people who have family members to enter or update the tax deduction data directly in the system. And finally, another feature, it's the e-signatures. Will actually connect Gecko with providers with tools that enable to electronically sign documents. For example, in HR world, these are usually contracts, annexes, and so on, which means that when you generate a document in Gecko, for example, a contract for a new employee, you will be able to also directly send it to sign via a different tool, but the employee or whomever needs to sign this document will be notified and electronically assign this document directly, and this information will directly flow into Gecko as well. So no more printing out, no more paperwork. Everything goes digitally now, and it will be stored in Gecko. So lots of good stuff coming up. We'll keep you posted. Have a look, keep an eye also on our LinkedIn channel for invitation for the next release. But before that, I would like to actually hand over to Gregor and Korana for the next step sections, just to talk about what comes next if you are interested in any of these features.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing the most interesting updates for Gecko Spring 21 release, and also showing us a little glimpse of what's coming in summer 21. If you have any questions, the time to ask them is now. And in the meanwhile, I will invite Gregor Mesaric to shortly introduce himself. Gregor, the stage is yours. Gregor, just unmute yourself.
Thank you, Korana. Hi, everyone. My name is Gregor Mesaric, and I work as a sales consultant for Gecko HRM at Agilcon. Usually, I am first contact when companies, so our potential customers, are looking for new HRM tool. I would say my main responsibility is to listen very carefully and advise them properly. So advise the right Gecko solution. Okay, today I believe you got a lot of interesting information about our new features coming into Gecko. So I would say if you are interested in any, please let us know. You can contact me directly to my email address, gregor.mesaric@agilcon.com. But please have in mind that all those add-ons are not completely free. So there is some configuration costs associated with those features. But anyway, just contact us and we will discuss about everything. And one more thing I would like to add is already Eva mentioned, our team is already preparing another Gecko webinar. The topic will be Gecko and e-signatures. We don't have an exact date. It still needs to be confirmed, but we know that the webinar will be held at the end of June. So yes, that's right. No more, like Eva said, no more printing documents, scanning documents, sending documents through the email. You will be able soon to sign documents directly in Gecko. So I think I believe this is all from my part. Enjoy and have a nice sunny Wednesday. Korana?
Thank you, Gregor. As we are almost at the end of webinar, I will just share the results of the poll we have invited you to. So it seems that the most interesting highlight from Gecko Spring release are assets, and then following trainings and integrations. So this is also valuable information for us. As it seems that we don't have any questions at this point, I would really like to thank everybody for participating. Of course, we will send all the materials from the webinar to all attendees via email in the next few days. We will also send you a short survey about webinar content and organization. And of course, we appreciate your feedback. I hope we will stay in touch and we will see you on our next webinar. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.